Greetings and welcome to 303, and welcome to a series of lectures on grammar usage as it relates specifically to ACT prep. This is lecture 1, the intro lecture, what we will, what we won't learn, as we kind of introduce you to the concept of the lectures to follow. The idea here is that in this first of 2 intro lectures, we're going to try and answer the question, why even learn this garbage in the first place? And then in the next lecture, we'll introduce you and outline for you what we mean even when we use the term, grammar. These talks, I should point this out, these talks are designed for students who want to improve knowledge of basic English grammar and prepare for any kind of standardized tests where there will be questions about English grammar and usage. Our primary focus, however, will be to help prepare students for the ACT. That's the primary reason for these lectures, and possibly why some of you are maybe watching these lectures, and I would recommend taking notes, what we call flowing the lecture. That way, if you have questions, you can always ask, follow up, do research, and the like. First of all, let's get out of the way a couple of things about the ACT as a test itself. Now, obviously, there's a lot of information out there about the ACT and what it is and how it's changed over the years and the like. But I think the first thing I need to point out really quickly, and I like to say this and remind you about this, the ACT is not an intelligence test. For example, I had a student came through the door, she was almost in tears, I wrote a 16 on the ACT, that means I'm dumb. To which my response was, no. The ACT does not measure intelligence, the ACT measures your ability to take a test. That is to say, the more prepared you are, the better prepared you are for the test, the better you seem to do, right? Of course, it's kind of like this one. If we were to all go jump in into Walt, my truck, and drive out to the edge of town, and we were to require one of you to jump out and say, okay, I'm gonna challenge you now to run all the way to Thermopolis, a town 30 miles away, ready, set, go, run. Of course, the student could take off, run, but, we could get in the truck and drive down a half a mile and, there's the student in the gutter asphyxiating, right? It's not to say that the student couldn't run to Thermop, but that running to Thermop would have to be something that he or she prepared for, trained for, right? With that in mind, the key to understanding what it is that the ACT is all about is first and foremost to point out it is a 3-hour reading test. I mean, think about what we're saying. Apart from the writing section on the ACT, you are reading the entire time, whether you're taking the science, whether you're taking the math section, whether you're taking the usage section, or of course the reading section itself. It's all reading. If you're not a reader of the kinds especially of information and stuff that's on the ACT, you will struggle. We're going to talk throughout these lectures about issues of energy conservation. That is to say, the ability to sit down and take the test if you know what's coming, if you are properly prepared for the test. You conserve less energy, you expend less energy, which means you conserve more energy, which of course is the ideal way to prep for the test, right? There are multiple sections of the ACT. We're going to be focusing on the grammar usage section in this series of lectures, okay? The ACT, by the way, and this is significant, and I would definitely put this in our notes, the ACT will never ask you to define a grammar rule. Right? It's not the way the test is constructed. It will test your ability, however, to identify grammar mistakes, rules that have been broken. So, for example, it's never going to ask you to define what a gerund is. Now, there are some standardized tests that do this, but the ACT is not one of them. They're never going to ask you to define what a comma splice or run-on sentence is. However, they are going to ask on the test for you to be able to identify that you can show that you understand when a comma splice error has been committed. Okay? That's why, I will argue, simply learning grammar rules is really of little value for you if you don't know how the grammar rules work. So in our conversations here, in this series of lectures, you're going to see that we're constantly talking about the application. What's the cash value? What's the payoff value here? How does the grammar rule actually work? And I'm going to try as best as I can to make this understandable to you. Okay? The most important thing about these lectures is that you really do have to want to learn something you can actually use that's meaningful, or these lectures will be like all of your study a waste of your time. There's little value, in other words, in memorizing lots of grammar rules to prepare for the ACT grammar section. It's more important to be able to use the rules you know. Remember that in 303, we define learning as the ability to connect new information to old information. So we're constantly going to be asking how we can connect what it is we're learning to stuff that we already know in the real world. A final couple of comments here. Hey, for the grammar snobs out there, and of course we all know these people, they're the ones who think they have to always correct your grammar usage and that kind of thing. You know, they're going to probably hate these lectures. I'm sorry, but they probably are. The chief fault will be that they will say, Mr. McGee is not going into enough detail. We need far more, complications here. But I'm going to make the argument going the other way. We really don't care what grammar snobs think. We care about an ACT score on the usage grammar section of the ACT. And because that's the case, we want the most minimalist, simplistic explanations so that we can actually remember this information while we're taking the test, which is, again, like we said, a lot of energy consumption, right? So how are we going to play this game? Well, we'll approach our study with, I would hope, a curious mind. It's the same observation we always make in 303 anytime we pick up a study. Let's try and come at our study of grammar with a little bit of curiosity, a little bit of wonder, maybe even try and have a bit of fun, if we can, doing this grammar thing. For example, let me just point this one out. I'll point out two observations that I hope maybe make you think a little bit. Germans speak German. Russians speak Russian. French speak French. Americans speak American? I don't think so. Americans speak English, like English speak English. Which begs the obvious question about all of these rules that we're going to study. Where did they come from? And how do we know about them? And why do we have these stupid rules? So for example, it's a comma splice if I use the comma, but if I put a little dot above it and turn it a comma into a semicolon, now it's acceptable and grammatically acceptable. Who made up all these stupid rules? About that I'm going to say very little. I will say if you're interested, you can obviously study in the field of linguistics and obviously language history. And there are answers to almost all of those kinds of really questions about why we do what we do. But I'm really not that interested in these kinds of questions and answering these kinds of questions here in this series of lectures. I'm far more interested in you simply saying, that's the comma splice rule. I can identify when it's being somehow broken. Good for me. One other observation. Note this one. Students will often come into my room and say, I hate grammar, to which I will respond by saying, yeah, I don't think so. No. I really do hate grammar. But I will point out, you have to actually use grammar to say I hate grammar. Wow, very interesting. Very interesting. Grammar, hate, I, is not usually the way a student will say I hate grammar. That is to say, there's some understanding of the use of grammar to very easily say I hate grammar. What you don't hate is grammar. What you hate is the study of grammar, maybe even the learning of grammar. But what I would say even more importantly and significantly is what you really hate is to feel like you don't know grammar. You feel inadequate. Somebody points it out to you, you feel dumb. So, let me make an observation. How about this? Let's just learn the basics so that we feel comfortable using the English language, especially as we're preparing for the standardized testing of the ACT. I'll see you in a bit for lecture number 2. Thank you.